for a homeowner who doesn't have issues right now, or they don't think that, they don't think they need to replace the equipment, but maybe they're having comfort issues. Maybe they have dust in their house. And what would you say to a homeowner who's like, there's not a big need for them to replace their equipment right now? What should they like prepare for when that day comes? Like, type of equipment, things to ask their heating, cooling contractors that come out, stuff like that.
Right. Well, I think one of the first is what we just mentioned is, does that contractor test the ducts? I think that's one of the first things, because those ducts, you've got to make sure that the delivery route is actually going to deliver the product, which is heating, cooling, into your home correctly. Otherwise, you're not going to get the investment that you've paid for. There's different efficiency ratings that HVAC equipment has, and that's determined in a laboratory environment where everything is perfect.
Perfect. Yeah.
Once you take that equipment out of the laboratory environment and you put it in someone's crawl space or their attic or their basement,
Garage,
all those
whatever.
efficiency variables change. And unless they're tested and verified, a homeowner has no guarantee what they're getting.
Yeah.
So that would be one of my first things, would be to test. Make sure that you're getting what you're investing in. Many HVAC professionals unintentionally inherit bad duct systems that they never intended to. And our mantra at NCI is, unless you test, you're guessing.
That's right. What would be another thing that homeowners should think about, like asking potential heating, cooling contractors before they come out?
Well, we talked about mentioning the ducts, and another spot you may not think that your heating and cooling contractor should look at is actually your home. And I know, Eric, we've talked a lot about how the home operates as a system within the HVAC system. It's actually the container for all the heating and cooling.
Right.
If a contractor comes out and they're only looking at numbers on your HVAC equipment, they've got that HVAC equipment's the system view. But if you have a contractor who comes out and they're looking at your insulation in your attic, they're looking at how well the house is sealed and how well your crawl space is put together, or different components of your building, and they want to do something called a load calculation, chances are pretty high that you've got yourself a good quality contractor who's trying to do things right, because just putting the same size equipment in usually is going to end up with problems. Bigger is not better with heating and cooling equipment. And many times there's small tweaks that can be made to an existing home, such as sealing up leaks to the outside, adding insulation, doing things that are minimal but have a huge return and can actually lower the size of the heating and cooling equipment, which will consume less electric and provide better comfort.
So before they even replace equipment, if they don't have an issue, that would be the time to think about air sealing the house, or adding insulation where it's necessary, or maybe even sealing the ductwork if there's no sizing issue, right?
Right.
So do those things first, and then you could actually install, smaller, more efficient equipment.
Right.
And one of the questions I hear a lot is like, most homeowners, I don't think, have any clue or aware about these new like 2-stage, multi-stage, variable output, equipment, dual fuel heat pumps. They just assume that, man, I've got a gas furnace sitting right there, I'm just going to get another gas furnace. And guess what? If the HVAC contractor doesn't provide these options and explain the benefits to them, then they're probably just going to go with the cheapest price again and get the same crap that they had before.
Yeah.
So
that's a lot of times what'll happen. And people will say, they don't make HVAC equipment like they used to. And there's truth to that, but not from a quality standpoint. It's from a precision standpoint. The older equipment was much more tolerant of bad installation conditions. It could deal with it. Where the newer equipment, the tolerances are so much tighter, so much more precise. Things that we used to be able to get away with in the heating and cooling industry, we can't with the newer equipment. It'll show up very quickly. And many times, even the controls, the thermostats, will tell on bad installation conditions, and they'll throw up error codes.
So can you give an example of the lack of tolerance comment there?
Yeah. So let's say that an old duct system, they changed the blower types. Older blowers used to be what was called a permanent split capacitor motor, and they would just produce low airflow on a bad duct system. Where the newer blowers are what are called variable speed, or ECM, electronically commutated motors. And whatever airflow ratings they're programmed for, they will try to produce it no matter what. They will actually get faster and faster. They'll get very noisy. And if they reach a certain point, that higher tolerance that we talked about, they will actually shut the equipment down and flash an error code. And many of those things are tied to the duct system itself, to its sizing, and even outside variables like the filter. If the filter is undersized, these are things that can affect that tolerance. And it's so much tighter because of the increased technology that's out there. And it's similar to automotive with vehicles.
Yeah, because there's the fully variable transmissions as well on cars.
They're connected to your phone, where older vehicles, I mean, your brakes could go out and you would have no idea until you push them.
Yeah. So I've heard some people say that, installing these two-stage or multi-stage pieces of equipment offsets or corrects, ductwork issues that were present before. And while I think that there's some truth to that, can you speak a little bit to some, the other side of that a little bit?
Yeah. And to a point they can, but you're paying a penalty for it. You're paying a very premium tax in order for it to do that. And you're not going to get the benefit out of that equipment because it's going to be subject, its efficiency and its operating, to the conditions that it's installed under. And what happens is it usually ends up with premature failure or not getting the life expectancy out of that equipment that you intend. It has to work so much harder to do that, when it's a lot of times so much easier just to fix the conditions instead of using the equipment as a bigger hammer to get the airflow through the ducts. Yeah. And the same thing with the, you mentioned the multi-stage, the variable capacity or inverter driven equipment that's out there that has really taken off. It's about as high as tolerance as you can get. They work great if they're on the right duct system. But if you put them on a bad duct system, they'll be a headache for everyone, the homeowner and the installing contractor.
Yeah, they're still going to be loud and inefficient and not cool or dehumidify properly in cooling mode. Yeah. So.
And that kind of brings us, you mentioned cooling, another one of the health issues that we talked about, and that's controlling humidity within a home.
Right.
It's, the newer equipment doesn't remove as much moisture as the older equipment did because of the efficiency ratings. So if you're in a mixed humid climate, kind of like where Eric and I are from Central Kentucky, you may need supplemental dehumidification during the shoulder seasons. Now, if you're in, say, like a climate that it's dry and it goes straight to cooling and all you need to do is lower the air temperature, it's not that big of a deal. But if you have to deal with any type of humidity removal, then there's other accessories that you may have to account for.
Yeah. And frankly, some of the most calls that I've gotten over the years, trouble complaints, have been related to moisture, humidity, mold growth, fungus, whatever, but it all kind of goes back to that moisture issue. And sometimes it's a moisture issue that's generated by the occupants. Their exhaust fans aren't working, or they're not using the kitchen range hood or whatever, disconnected vents. But I was shocked to learn that these new higher efficiency air conditioners are actually worse at dehumidification than the old ones. And I don't think anybody outside the HVAC industry knows that or is prepared for that. And being in the new construction world for so long and seeing these new equipment standards coming out, and those complaints have gotten more and more frequent over the last few years. And I think they're only going to escalate this year with the new higher standards that are coming out. So
it's already showing up.
So, that really goes back to the importance of the heating cooling contractor taking into account the cooling load of the house and how tight and how well insulated it is, and the orientation, so that they're not putting in equipment that's too big, that's going to short cycle.
Right.
Because it's got to run, 20 minutes or more, especially if it's 85, 90, 95 degrees outside and it's humid. It's got to run pretty much all the time to dehumidify the air properly.
Yeah. And it should. That's what it's designed to do. Or should be designed to do.